the CTO, Cloud and Enterprise Microsoft, Mr. Dave Campbell.
Good morning, everyone. When Anil asked me to come over and speak for the Azure conference, I jumped at the opportunity. I've been to India a number of times, and the reason I was excited to come, in my role, I have an opportunity to travel all over the place, all over the planet. And India has a special combination of three things that I think, given this moment in time, it really made sense for me to come over, and I'm excited to participate in the conference. Those three things are as follows. One, the deep technical skills. Being a deep technologist myself, I appreciate that. And the second thing is the entrepreneurial spirit, which I see all over the place. And the third thing is perhaps the most important, is this pragmatism and sensibility about what are the meaningful problems to solve, what are the meaningful challenges, and what are the clever ways of solving them. So I find those first two things in many countries around the planet. I don't find the combination of those three very often at all, and I see them here in India. So happy to come over because I think we have an amazing opportunity. It's my 31st year in the industry, and the opportunity and the potential for many companies who see it to leapfrog and get ahead of others is just an amazing point in time. Frankly, for Microsoft, we have an opportunity to leapfrog some of our traditional competitors in the enterprise space, and so I want to share some of that with you. As Bhaskar mentioned, Satya stands up and talks about a mobile-first, cloud-first world. And clearly, we're in that. And one way that you can look at this as a linear extrapolation from client and server. You can just take client and server and map it into mobile-first, cloud-first. And that's a straightforward way to think about it. But what I want to do here in the next couple of slides is to challenge everyone in the room to unlock your imagination around what's possible. And the point I want to make here is that the cloud is a disruptive technology. And we can look across the course of history at times when we've had technologies that have been introduced that have a disruptive potential, but there's a delay between the disruptive potential and our ability to capitalize on it. As a society, we tend to look at things in form and function with a lens towards the past rather than a lens towards the future. So I'll make that point this way. When automobiles first came along, they were referred to as horseless carriages, and their form was as a carriage. And if you look at the picture here, the seat is up high, it's open in the front, which made sense if there was a horse in front of you because you wanted to be higher than the tail end of the horse and you wanted to hold on to the reins. Now, cars had this form for the first 10 or 20 years. And it was very difficult. A lot of technical challenges to put an internal combustion engine in, figure out how you're going to get them to steer. Those technical challenges were solved. And then there was a lag before the imagination came on and said, we don't need to have the seat that high. We don't need to have a tiller. And that's when there was a second wave of disruption that really opened up the opportunity for the automobile. Transistor is another example. The transistor was invented in pursuit of a better vacuum tube. Along the course of that work, people realized it was a great digital switch. But it was perhaps 5 or 10 years after its leverage as a vacuum tube replacement that people really started to capitalize on what we could do with digital switching and logic circuits using transistors as well. So the cloud offers another opportunity. So we can think about it as cheaper infrastructure, and that's kind of with a backward-looking lens. But the thing I really want to take away, it's one of the most important points here, is how do we think about it for its disruptive potential? And I'll come back to this point over and over in the talk and we go through some of the demos. So I have firsthand experience in this. When I worked at Digital long ago, around the same time that Sybase came out with the first version of SQL Server. And the incumbents, folks like IBM, folks like Digital, folks looked at it and somewhat dismissed it. They said, well, it's not as good as the product we have. The authentication's not as good, it was not as fast, it doesn't have row-level locking. We completely missed the point that it enabled an entirely new, valuable scenario. So what was playing out at that point is not unlike what's happening today with mobile devices you have in your hand, but it was devices you had on your desk. Powerful engineering workstations, PCs and such. And what Sybase allowed you to do was to build solutions where someone could take data out to those powerful terminals, those PCs and engineering workstations where the new power was, and then bring it back into the data server in a coherent way. And so the point here is when looked at from the old lens, it was easy to dismiss this. You had to look at it for its disruptive potential to see the new opportunity. And in my role as CTO and talking to a number of businesses, we see this in the sense that people look at the cloud, and if you look at it through its backward lens, you'll say, oh, is it as secure? Is it this or is it that? You have to understand some of its potential for disruptive potential, and that's what we'll talk about for much of the rest of the talk. Okay? So the disruptive technology here enabled new scenarios, and the most important point is it redefined better. So if there's one key point from this talk to take away is disruption has the potential to redefine what is better. And we see this in many, many places right now. Big data is one example of that, and we'll have examples of that later on. So Azure in that context. We think of Azure inside the cloud and enterprise business at Microsoft in terms of 5 pillars. And if we could do a 3-day keynote and cover all of these at some depth, and so I'm just going to focus on 2 of them this morning. But this is how we chart the business, how we do sort of our weekly and monthly reviews in the leadership team and such. And I'm going to focus on what we call transform the data center. And I'm going to use some of the same images that Bhaskar used, but I just want you to watch this one roll by. One of the things that is incredible, in my experience, I've been doing software, enterprise software, for probably 25 years or so. And our pace of innovation at Microsoft, it's amazing what the cloud affords us to do. By one specific measure, I can argue that our pace of innovation is 1,000 to 1 what it was, say, 4 or 5 years ago. So I came and did a lot of work in the database space at Microsoft, worked on SQL Server, and we used to ship roughly every 3 years. So think about that as about 1,000 days. And if people are writing code throughout that period, you could say it's roughly 500 days mean time from writing a line of code to having it meet a customer in that. In the new world, we can change a line of code and measure its effects with customers later on the same day. So think about this going from roughly 500 days to half a day in terms of our ability to learn. And so our ability to ship and our pace of innovation. In fact, one of the most important forms of currency within Microsoft right now is our pace of learning. And sort of our innovation agility. And I'm happy to talk with people offline about that because it's just a fascinating shift. And the business is growing tremendously. And the way that we monitor the business is vastly different. I'll probably touch on that a couple of times as well. And so there's this flywheel that is beginning. And all of that innovation is coming into your hands much quicker. And I think that for the new companies, when we talk to existing ISVs, existing SIs, some existing customers, you can either look at this for its opportunity, the fact that I have more innovation to capitalize on, or you can think about it in terms of change and, can I keep up? And I think for all of us, it's our ability to keep up and drive change is going to define and separate the winners from the losers going forward. So same thing that Bhaskar talked about, how we differentiate. I'm going to focus on hyperscale. And I won't spend much time here in terms of the footprint. You heard that. But in terms of the form of the data centers, we have a data center in Quincy, Washington, which is a couple of hours east of Redmond and Seattle. And on this one site, we have 4 generations of data center. And it's fascinating because the first generation wasn't built that long ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And if you walk into it, it looks like a Cadillac, beautiful data center that you've seen in movies and TV shows, and many of you have walked up and down the aisles yourself. And when you get to the last generation, this is out in the high plains of the Northwest, and you see concrete pads with things that look like shipping containers. They get dropped in place with big forklifts, and you get power, water, network and air plugged into them, and they're pretty much sealed units. And so what is interesting here is the contract between the hardware and the software is evolving. So you can think about this as a world of software-defined everything. Now, one of the things that is really, really critical here, and Bhaskar mentioned this as well, in terms of where Microsoft stands. We've been a platform company for a long, long time. One of the, you could call it an amazing accident, fortune, if you will. Microsoft has been in large-scale consumer internet services for 15 or 20 years. And we've also had this very large commercial enterprise software business. And we're the only ones now, as the cloud comes together, who are able to leverage the scale of Bing, Xbox Live, Skype, and our learnings there, and bring what we learn there into sort of the commercial cloud business as well. So it's an amazing opportunity, amazing advantage. So we process data for Bing. The data scale is measured in exabytes. We read and write hundreds of petabytes a day on clusters. The largest cluster we have is north of 50,000 machines in a single cluster to go off and do that. So it's an incredible opportunity for us to leverage that learning and bring it over here. So these data center buildings we have can hold 2 commercial jets, and we site them in areas where we can put together up to 16 buildings in one of these data centers. We separate them, have several in a region, and we separate them. And so within a specific data center, we have a set of constraints. We try to get them close enough within a millisecond and a half or 2 milliseconds speed of light distance, networking distance, so that we could do synchronous replication across these for other, and then geo replication around the globe, and all of that sort of is available for you. So up to 600 servers per Azure region. And there are only a few commercial companies that are running at million server scale. And I've been doing this for a long time. There's a colleague of mine, his name is Yusuf Khaledi. He used to be the CTO of Solaris at Sun. And he runs all of networking in Azure now. A couple of months ago, we were having coffee and just talking about this. Nothing that we had done in our decades of experience in enterprise software really prepared us for what it meant to build things that are continuous. You never shut them down, you never reboot them, you never have a chance to upgrade them all at once at million server scale. So an incredible amount of learning that's all available now for you to innovate on top of. Enterprise grade. So the analysts look at this. Gartner, who many of you know, has these magic quadrants. Microsoft is the only one who's in the leaders quadrant for all 3 of their cloud all 4 of their cloud magic quadrants. Another thing that Bhaskar touched on was this 27018 ISO standard. I think that's the one of all of these. There's a large alphabet soup, but that's one that I'm really proud of in the following sense. It is a cloud data privacy standard. We helped others, worked with others to define it. And you have to understand that Microsoft's business is not about leveraging other people's data. Our business is about building platforms. Now, if we can help broker people to leverage and use each other's data and bring more data together to create value in appropriate ways, we'll do that. But we found it was really important with respect to privacy to say that we're first and foremost about being a platform company. And if you're a platform company, the only way you succeed is by making others successful. It's as simple as that. You only succeed if we make the people in this audience successful. And so what are the guarantees that we want to offer to folks to make them feel comfortable with leveraging the platform? We've got a new, in terms of working with hardware vendors and folks like Intel, this G family, which is sort of a massive machine available for big data, big compute workloads coming there as well. So present, the largest virtual machines in the public cloud. Premium storage, enterprise class storage, 50,000 IOPS for VM and such. And so a lot of work going into making this more of an enterprise-grade solution. And a marketplace. So you can think of this as the app store for various things. This could be a route to market for many of the services that people in the audience could go off and build. And finally, I want to spend a little bit of time on hybrid. Because hybrid's a thing that for people who don't, some hardware vendors and software vendors who don't fully understand what the cloud's all about are trying to paintbrush themselves with the hybrid sort of thing. I think of hybrid as being scenarios where part of the scenario makes sense to do in the cloud and part of the scenario makes sense on-premise. It's the hybrid scenarios are the ones that have the most value. And I'll focus on two here in the next slide. We talk about connecting every existing server into the cloud. And we have a storage solution, Store Simple, which you can think of as a bottomless SAN. It's an appliance that you can install that snapshots to the cloud. And you can continue to snapshot things to the cloud. And if the appliance fails, you can just bring in another one. It's just like getting a new phone. You put in your credentials and everything downloads and restores. So there's an interesting hybrid scenario there. The other one I'll spend just a second on is identity. So in this new world, there are analogies. There are jobs that still need doing. They just need to be done in a new way. So if you think about what an set of enterprise applications looked like, say, 10 years ago, in a Microsoft shop. You would have applications that were integrated with Active Directory. You'd have single sign-on. Employees would come in. They'd be provisioned. Devices would be provisioned. PCs would be domain joined. So provisioning and deprovisioning of users, provisioning and deprovisioning of applications, provisioning and deprovisioning of devices still needs to happen, but it happens in a new way. And so what we've done with Azure Active Directory is to do that and integrate with 2,000, roughly, ISVs. And the thing you want to be able to do is give those new applications, those SaaS solutions to your employers. But if someone leaves the company, you don't want them to be able to log into all of those applications later on that same day. So with the single sign-on capability, there's a great hybrid solution where you're using a cloud identity solution to be able to integrate all of the authentication activity across all of these SaaS applications. And another point I'll make here is hybrid opportunities at a higher level. So I want to lift it up above just infrastructure and VMs and storage. Bhaskar mentioned Delve, the Office graph. So we have the ability to create a graph of very interesting entities in corporations. Who reports to whom? Who sends mail to whom? Who are in meetings together? Those are structural relationships. They're defined by the org structure, who I work for. There's also an opportunity to do computed relationships. Who knows what? If I were going to have a meeting on a particular topic and I was going to invite people from my organization, who are the top 15 people I should consider to have a group of 8 come together and discuss some topic? And what we want to be able to do is provide a platform to enable people to build solutions like that by extending Office 365 and Delve. And so think of the platform not just as storage and plumbing and VMs, but at a much higher level as well. So then how do we think about adding Azure to your data center? This is both at an infrastructure level with things like ExpressRoute, but also as we learn at million server scale, sometimes we refer to as the cloud design point. We're working with hardware vendors. As I mentioned earlier, the definition, the contract between hardware and software changes. So we're working with a number of the OEMs. How does their hardware evolve to be more tailored towards the cloud design point? So we've announced an appliance in combination with some hardware vendors that captures as much of what we've learned in Azure that can be shrunk down into an appliance form factor. And then there's a software-only version of that known as the Windows Azure Pack that gives you the portal and many of the services, and increasingly will deliver Azure-style services on Windows Server as well going forward. So it's a really deep and rich definition of what hybrid means. So there's sort of a next level below in terms of what we talk about in terms of hyperscale, enterprise grade, and hybrid. And all of these things come together in ways that change the worlds for others. So what I want to do is invite Subbu from Mindtree up just for a couple minutes to just have a brief conversation around what it looks like, not from someone standing up here from Microsoft, but from Mindtree. So thanks, Subbu. Great.
Thank you very much.
So we just had several things, and I mentioned sort of the disruptive potential of the cloud. How do you see that playing out for Mindtree and your customers real quickly?
See, we are fortunate to be in the era of disruptions, and today we are seeing cloud as a major disruption that is happening. What we have seen is that the whole resource-constrained view is no longer existing, and there are many things that are possible using that. Say, for example, how a distant education is happening, and then how you are rendering your services using the cloud.
Yes.
Right? How you are having your whole coursework, and then how you are rendering. The whole thing is happening to cloud today. Right?
Fantastic, yeah.
Like Bhaskar mentioned that Pune is known for its universities, but today somebody is aspiring to be a Harvard graduate sitting in Pune. Right? And the second thing we are seeing is that a typical aircraft, which is having a lot of data,
Yes.
is looking at how we be better, right, in terms of turnaround of the aircraft at the terminal.
Yeah.
Right? Now, how do they get the data out of the aircraft,
Yep.
and how do they crunch it, and then so on, and then seeing that how the whole experience is made better for the end user and consumer, right? And we're also seeing about the digitization, where a lot of digital assets, I think we have heard also during the course of these conversations, people speak about how digitization is helping in terms of giving back to the end consumers.
That's fantastic. The aircraft one is interesting because one of the things I see and say quite often is I think we're moving from a world of automation, automating processes we know how to fully describe, to a world of optimization.
Exactly.
Right? And that's where a lot of the new value will be created. So I think it's
in
great
this
to
whole
see.
process of optimization, people are looking at how I improve my efficiency in service that I can offer to my
And
customers.
that sort of fits in with our new definition of productivity. Right?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, great.
Right,
So
right.
the next question for you was inhibitors, both within your organization. And when there's a disruptive technology that comes along, some people are anxious about the change.
Right.
And I've seen sort of our customers, how they perceive the cloud changing rapidly. How do you see it from your standpoint?
See, the inhibitions were always there when the technologies and the disruptions were not understood better.
Yeah.
Now I think the understanding is much better. And certainly we are realizing what value it is adding to the overall environment that we are creating. And we have seen, say, for example, we work with customers in the BFSI segment.
Yep.
And it has always been a constraint for them in terms of the compliances, in terms of the regulations, in terms of the security. I think some of it Bhaskar also has mentioned and talked about it. But now if you see the amount of security that is being put in, the number of layers that have come out in the data centers, and also the compliance certifications that they have brought in proactively are enabling us to have those conversations with the customers, make them feel comfortable, and then see how best cloud is leveraged in the overall goals that they are having.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I see these cases where there are inversions happening.
Absolutely.
Where people had an inhibition that quickly says it's an advantage on the other side.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a neat thing. We can talk about that.
Right.
So managing change, that's another one. So it's funny because as my role as CTO, I think that more than half of my psychic energy over the last few years has gone into managing the change within our own teams and helping customers and such. How do you see that?
See, change management has been always a tough ask, and certainly when disruptive technologies are evolving, it's even more tougher.
Yes.
So what we have done is to continuously train our own people in terms of these technologies, and especially the customer-facing people in terms of how they can make the businesses backward better in terms of their conversations that they will have with the customers, and then make sure that they understand not the technology of cloud, but also how they are leveraged for the customers' businesses, and then have an intelligent conversations in terms of enabling them through the cloud. So it's continuous journey, it's a continuous learning, and it's a continuous trainings that we do within the organizations, right? And also from the technologist perspective, it's now how they broaden their view of how they define and architect the product.
Exactly.
With SaaS coming, and then your interfaces are now really broadened.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Now how you think through those. So we again go through these training programs for the developers, and certainly attending the conferences like this will also enable and enlighten them from the development perspective.
Absolutely.
Right?
There's a thing that you reminded me of. One of the things I think it's important for all of us in a shift like this is to value unlearning. Absolutely. What are the things from the old way of doing things that we thought were the way to do it that don't apply in this new world? Yeah,
right.
No, that's fantastic.
See, once upon a time, the three-layered architecture was a great thing. But now, how you leverage the cloud and the SaaS models in terms of how you integrate various things is the one that would come into
So we have to consciously unlearn. So final sort of thing, open-ended, because we're both been doing this for roughly the same amount of time. What do you expect to see in the next 2 to 3 years?
See, I think growth.
Yeah.
It's going to grow. I think I echo what Bhaskar has mentioned. Certainly the startup ecosystem within India is seeing a tremendous growth. And certainly the cloud is the best way to leverage and then realize their ideas and then bring out different business models. And similar thing is happening within our own organizations as well. Whenever people have different ideas, for them to realize those ideas, cloud is the best way to go and then realize those ideas.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time, Sue.
Thanks a lot, Davis.
Good chatting with you.
Thank you.
So Sue mentioned something that is really, really important, and I see it in evidence. We'll see it up here. We show a couple of demos. Is that, and frankly, it's happening to Microsoft as well. And I have conversations with Global 100 companies, and when we talk about disruption, it has two sides to it, sort of a negative side and a positive side. But businesses, up into and including their fundamental business model, are just being completely changed. Microsoft's fundamental business model, evolving from a perpetual license software to subscription form services, is very, very different. And so in that shift as well, there are tremendous opportunities for startups and entrepreneurs to make that shift. So I may be biased. In fact, I'll admit to being biased by being sort of a data guy. But I believe sort of where the real value in the technology stack is, it moves upwards over time. And if you go back 20, 25 years ago, you had to go buy a TCP IP stack for your operating system. Now it's just part of the operating system. And a lot of things, from big data environments, relational database engines, operating system kernels, are pretty much commoditized, and the real value is up above. And much of the new value is how can we maximize the return on data. And I'm going to spend a bunch of time on that, not just because I consider myself a data head, but because I do think that's where much of the economic opportunity is going to be over the next 10 years or so. So we have a whole host of things that we've introduced as managed services, such that you don't have to go install and do the plumbing yourself. It was 4 years ago, almost, I think it was 4 years ago, this May, that I wrote a little 4-page memo why Microsoft should adopt Hadoop. Where it stands right now, Microsoft is one of the major contributors to Hadoop. In fact, if you're familiar with how the Apache Software Foundation works, there's a project management committee, and there's a chairperson for each top-level project in the project management committee who controls the gavel. They define the agenda and such. The chairperson for Hadoop in the Apache Software Foundation is a Microsoft full-time employee right now. Not a lot of people would take that bet. So there's a lot out there and a lot that we're bringing. But really what's behind it is the following thing. And this, what I'm about to describe, is not going to be a surprise to anyone in the audience. Pretty much data, everything is born digitally right now. And it's free to capture data. We used to pay people key punch and manuscript typing, and I did an analysis a few years back in the US. You could still find people who would do key punch and manuscript typing. It was roughly $1 a kilobyte. And so $1 billion a terabyte. It's expensive that way. But we get it for free, and storage is approaching free. A terabyte of storage 30 years ago was over $200 million just to buy the hard drives to go store it. Now it's 30 US dollars and such like that. And so opportunity for ambient data is just tremendous. And then we have the machinery to take that ambient data and turn it into information and knowledge. And then once we've got information and knowledge, we can use it for insight and action. And that's where we can really, really change things. And so if you look at Azure as a platform, we provide core capabilities and managed services to do all of this. Okay? And that's not to say you can't go down to the raw VMs and bring your own, set up your own Hadoop if you want to, but we offer a managed solution as well. And so the opportunity here to not focus on the infrastructure, but to focus on creating value above that is there, and it makes it easier. And so to represent that, I'm going to invite Mohan and Anand from Hyfex to come up and just give us a quick demo of the solution that they've built. So come on up, guys. Good seeing you. Super. So if you can just take 30 seconds and tell me real quickly what you built and why you did it and how you did it so quickly.
Yeah. In fact, we're going to show the demo of what we built on the Azure platform for managing the standard operating procedures, especially it's called SOPs. And if you typically consider the oil and gas industry, a mid-sized company would be managing close to around 3,000 to 4,000 wells, oil wells. And they have a standard set of 250 to 300 documents, which they have to customize based on the locations and what the activity is going on. And this is important from the compliance point of view and also the audit and health and safety and so on.
Okay.
So it's like we're talking about 500,000 documents for just one company in a year's time.
Okay.
And if you consider 10 of companies, it's going to be 5 million documents. So it's come out a huge amount of data.
Yeah, so these are highly structured documents.
It's highly unstructured data. So if you look at one of the sample SOP documents, so it's like it consists of just text and images, just text and images. Then you have tabular data. So it's like it's just see.
So this is how they built it before.
This is how they built it before. And so what we did was we developed a SaaS multi-tenant solution. So it's like the experts at HiFX, we build a very solution wherein we can just drag and drop the various elements of the SOP. So it's just a drag and drop.
So you're going to show us that next.
Just going to show us that. So what's going to happen is you just log in. And once you log in, you'll get to see the tool that is basically used to create the SOP. So you can just drag and drop. These are the various elements of the SOP for the oil and gas industry. So you have the recognized safety concerns, the hazardous.
So here there's semantics behind these. You understand it. So this is not just like a rich text web editor.
No, it's
you
not
understand
fixed.
the semantics.
This is all captured, managed, the backend.
We're
keeping everything in document DB. And it's like it's all collections based, so you can just pick it up and you can manage if there is any new regulations that is coming in. Because it's like every year the industry changes the regulations. So that means the one who has authored this has to make sure that all these things is updated and it is this information is passed on to the field operators, the foremans, because those are the people who are going to use this.
And you have to know that they've actually gone through and done the standard operating procedure. So you haven't done it yet, but we were talking last night where you may have workflows in here to be able to let people check off and know the
That's the next step. So what, this is already rolled out. So next step is what is going to happen is we're going to integrate to the workflow services. So it's like we can track what people are basically using and how they have used it. Because it's all tied up to the safety concerns, as I mentioned. So if anything goes wrong, the company has to pay a huge insurance premium. So our aim is to make sure that they can keep the insurance premium down.
So let me ask you a question. How much time did you spend on building this? What fraction of time building the solution and what fraction of time working on the infrastructure?
That's a very good question. So we started on Azure in October. And the document DB was a good bet for us. So what you see here, it's like it's just 3 months of effort. So we don't want to concentrate much on the managed services. The document DB was a good fit for us. Because it contains first of all, it's a non-SQL database. It comes with transactional support. And especially you like the trigger, the option. And plus it's the built-in support with the Azure search. So that was a key factor for us to go in.
So you've taken Document DB, Azure Search, built your solution. You haven't done anything at the infrastructure level.
Nothing at all.
And when you go to a workflow, and then you can leverage more of it. You may actually do Active Directory at some point.
We need to do that. That's going to bring much value to the enterprise. So it's like if somebody wants to search for a document with the shutting down of a well, you just key in search and they can bring up all sorts of documents. And we're just keeping these documents just as normal JSON structure within the document DB. So and already see it's on the stage, this document that comes up, it's on real time.
So do you think the managed services have, what sort of effect have they had on your pace of innovation?
It's good. For us, because it's like we don't have to worry about what's basically going on at the back end. I mean, how it is, the scalability, the manage, because it's all about high availability. It's just like the foremans and the field operators, they have to go through these trainings at the remote locations. So we are going to make sure that this is even available on the mobile devices. So they can always have a reference point for that. And we can keep a tab on who is basically accessed it and when, how long did they spend on that?
Yep.
Because it's very important from the audit point of view.
Fantastic. So one of the things we talked about last night around sort of how the global footprint, the oil and gas industry, they're around the planet.
Around the
everywhere.
world,
So one of the things I've chatted with both the Azure Search and Document DB teams, think about, everyone familiar with content delivery networks, typically with static content.
Yep.
But you can think about actually having active content delivery networks to be able to pre-stage everything, all the business processes you need, say, for a global company like oil and gas.
Exactly.
And just have it low latency from anywhere on the planet.
Exactly.
Right? So that's another capability,
That's a very capability
that we will
that we're looking
provide
for.
at some point for you as well.
So that's
super. Any
thing
final thoughts or points?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very impressive this thing for us because we've been in the cloud industry since 2010.
Yep.
And we've been with the other partner, set of companies. But this is the first time we're working on the Azure, the platform. And for us, it was like a very good, what do you say? It's been an excellent opportunity for us.
Yep.
And the team has been very supportive.
Great.
They have taken most of our suggestions and they said it's being rolled out and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a tremendous opportunity in terms of the for the business, in terms of the productivity that we are going to bring in.
Fantastic.
That's been the whole team out here now, increasing the productivity.
Yeah, so you mentioned the team has been responsive. And that's that other point. I talked about our pace of innovation.
Yep.
Our ability to make a change and get the effects of the change back into customers' hands quickly in our cloud. It's so much easier to do than having to go burn DVDs and wait for the next release 2 years from now. So it really fits together well.
That's the pace at which things are happening now. It's like we could even talk to the document DB engineering team at Seattle and tell them, okay, this is what we're exactly looking for. And those guys are really fantastic. I should really thank them for that.
All right,
Excellent guys.
Guys, thanks for your time. It's a great solution.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care. See you. Thanks. So, I mean, that really does highlight that you can focus on solving a valuable customer problem without having to be focused on the infrastructure. And really, to be clear, what we want to be able to provide is the base infrastructure platform where if you want to do it yourself, you can. But if you want to start, and if any of you have sort of followed the lean startup movement, the notion of building a minimal viable product, how do you, the least amount of energy to go produce something of value? I think it's really demonstrated well with the HiFix solution. So here's another interesting slide for the geeks in us. I've been thinking about sort of the time value of insights, okay? And there are some insights that have a long duration. And so if seatbelts save lives, smoking causes cancer, right? It's knowing those facts once we get the insight, it's as valuable a year from now as it is today in terms of what we can do in response. There are other insights that are fleeting and ephemeral. So if you think about the insights, the leverage that is used in high-frequency trading, its half-life is probably measured in microseconds, right? You capitalize on it or you lose the opportunity. And in the middle, this is where so much economic value is going to be created. There are a set of insights that are in human scale. Okay, and I'll make this concrete. So if you do shopping basket analysis and recommendations, so when you're checking out of an e-commerce site, people who bought this also bought things like this. So if you can do that real time and actually have that show up during the buying process, figure it's worth some amount. Now, let's imagine that you weren't good enough to do that and you could run a batch process at night and send someone an email the next day. Do you think that would be as valuable? Not nearly as valuable. If you're doing display ads and web searches, and you know someone's searching for automobiles in local car dealerships, if you get that insight and can act on it while they're doing it, it's perhaps 100 or 1,000 times more valuable than to figure it out 5 days later after they bought the car. And so the trick here, and the most amazing thing, is that if you can generate the insight and have it precede the point of decision, you can alter the course of the outcome. And that is incredibly valuable. And in increasing cases, we can see where we're able to generate the insight before the decision and change the course of the outcome. So I think about this broadly as having these 3 areas. There's societal pace, where Things take a long time, we'll generate the insight, and that's great. There's machine pace. You can almost think about lots of, control systems, anti-lock brakes, high-frequency trading, extreme machine-to-machine sorts of things. And then there's the human pace. And I think many of the new business opportunities, valuable business opportunities, are about these new insights that alter the course of human processes. Bhaskar spoke briefly about Delve and the ability to see what's happening in the org through the use of machine learning and interesting techniques. I'll give you a real example of this from Azure, and I'll probably come back to this later on. Azure Machine Learning, which we use. There was a slide a long time ago. I went quickly over it. We have over 1 million user databases in our Azure public relational database service. We could not hire enough people, not get enough eyeballs and screens together to watch over that. And we can't wait for customers to say, hey, something doesn't look right. So we've built a temporal anomaly detection service that's called 1 million times a day to look for statistical outliers, things we should pay attention to. So that insight we can take into our hands to improve our customer experience before anything bad happens, and we change the course of the outcome. So this is really, really important. And a great example of that is in Lytix, and I'm going to invite Vamsi up to the stage to give us a demonstration of that in the healthcare space. So, Vamsi, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Super. And so you're going to run a video and then chat to it? Is that the?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I just wanted to give them a background, a 30-second background of who we are, what we do.
Great.
So we're a company called Enlightex, stemming from the phrase enlightenment through analytics. And I just want to give you a futuristic scenario. Let's say in 2020, 2025, just imagine someone going for a checkup. Let's assume a 40-year-old lady going for a checkup. Instead of going to a hospital or a clinic setting, she actually goes to a kiosk. And she sits there while a robo is actually beautifying her nails, an EKG, an ECG, a blood test, and a bunch of things are happening, and it actually says that, you know what, 3 days down the lane, you're going to get a mild flu. So 50 hours later, please take this personalized medicine, and lo, she takes that medicine, and 3 years later, she doesn't have any flu, no fever, no cough, no cold. She goes to work, she's very happy, and life's great. So are we really there? No. But there are a whole lot of things that you can see out there in terms of Da Vinci robots, in terms of Scanadu, in terms of, more importantly, what Azure in terms of machine learning is giving you. And that's an exact example that we're going to show you in terms of how do we move from reactive care to proactive care to preventative care. We all want to live long and live very happily.
So in this case, you're using the power of predictive analytics to turn something from a responsive care to a proactive care. Much, much cheaper.
Absolutely.
Vastly cheaper to be able to do it that way.
Absolutely. So just as an example, right, an admission in the United States for something in asthmatic care could cost about $6,000. A care coordinator calling them up and say, these are all your high-risk patients that you can see, which is around the circle in the red color, and it got all the models in terms of who are my hypertensive patients, who will be my hypertensive patients, what are the readmission models, who are my diabetic patients, who will become diabetic, is what we are seeing really out here. And once we click on high-risk patients, you get a list of the patients in terms of whether they're gastrointestinal, circulatory, or cardiac, or neurological in those areas. Then you get to go and choose any one of them, and it gives you a list of the patients out there. So this is a work list that the hospital or the clinics basically see. Choose a patient. The one on the left-hand side are the diseases that they have today, and the one on the right is actually the diseases that we are predicting in 44 days, in 47 days, in 54 days, with a probability of 86%, you're actually going to get this particular disease out there. Now, you can actually go down to it, and one of the models that we're going to show is to do with hypertension. It's about 94.1% accurate in what we're showing. So we're saying in the next 12 months' time, this person will get hypertension, and we are 94% accurate saying that this person would get hypertension. So that's exactly where we're going now. So we just click on it. I'm sorry. So these are the facilities or the different hospitals. The entire set of diseases are broken down into critical and non-critical. And we're actually saying who are your high-risk patients today, who will be your high-risk patients in the next 30 days, in the next 60 days, in the 90 days, and so on and so forth. And what we do is we go back, choose a hypertension model, and we're going to delve a little deeper into that. And so these are all my list of patients that I have. And you can see it's extremely fast. It's basically runs computation, millions of computations in a given point of time, and comes back and gives you that information saying that this patient had no family history of hypertension, no past medical history of hypertension, yet has a very high probability of getting hypertension in the next 6 months' time or the 9 months' time. And how do we do this is what the next screen is about. So these models are all self-service models. So you don't need to know statistics, you don't need to know computational models, you don't need to understand too much of technology. You just go over there, put your data in, you got your mandatory fields automatically taken up by the system. Then you have got other things like your serum creatinine and other variables that you can actually input into your models, change them in real time without understanding the difference between a logistic regression or a classifier or machine learning algorithms like SVM or a random forest and so on and so forth. And the system will give you this entire information of the data now, applies different algorithms like duplicate values, missing values. So let's say, for example, if a patient gender is not there, but the patient actually went through a pap smear test, for example. So we know that it's a female. And the system would automatically impute that value. There are no business rules. There are no hard coding in the entire system. And it's just going to go through. I'll just see if Dave has any question, and I'll come back to the last and show you the results.
Yeah, so the interesting thing here is that this is return on accessible data. We talked about time to insight. The other thing is return on accessible data. So your ability to pool data across a whole bunch of facilities makes better models. And we were talking about how do you do healthcare, there's privacy concerns and such like that, but the ability to roll it up and process it in the cloud is where you're getting your value. So anonymization of patient records and such, how are you pulling that off?
So just like you showed, so I'm just going to stop this for a second now.
And I'll tee up the other question because actually, I'll let you go. No, that's fine.
So what we do is there's a huge challenge, and this data, honestly, about 2 years ago, if we had to crunch the number of computations, today we have 1 billion records. That's about 24, 25 million patients that we're speaking about. It sits in a graph database.
Yep.
The number of nodes that exist are more than a few 100 million nodes. There is no way I could have afforded to actually do a computation on a data like that.
Yep.
Today, it's absolutely feasible. So what we do in terms of the second part, which is with respect to security, we completely anonymize the data. So this is called a querent smart grid.
Yep.
We remove all the PHI elements. There were 28 of them, which is a part of the HIPAA, the Privacy Act. So we remove all of them. The system always checks if any of those fields exist, like the patient's first name, last name, mobile number, or any kind of unique identifier. The system automatically removes them. We also go through, and more importantly, if you'd seen in the presentation, so Azure, from a business perspective, is already a HIPAA compliant cloud. You have ISO 27001. We are also in ISO 27001, so there is a certain set of information security standards that we need to follow.
Right.
And we go through this entire process right from encryption, so at an organization level of security standards to compliance from a HIPAA perspective, in between your coding, encryption, and everything that goes in.
So to that point around this disruptive, if you had gotten hung up over the fact that there are challenges around the data, you wouldn't even be able to offer the service that you are, because it is your ability to pool all of this data and do this vast number crunching that enables the entire thing, that creates those accurate models you talked about.
Absolutely. The first time that we went and we requested someone to give us the data, after speaking to them for 2 days, they said, okay, take these 50 records with you.
Yeah.
I said, I can't run a model, a statistical or computational model in 50 records. Can you give me a little more data? He said, okay, I'm going to give you 75 records.
Yeah.
I said, dude, I can't do anything with 75 records. What I talk about here is hundreds of thousands of records for me to say that my model actually works well.
Right.
And it's taken us a lot of time. I think healthcare is a little slow in terms of, when compared to other industries, and I've been in that industry for 15 years, it's a little slow in terms of embracing technology, but it's happening. And I can see that across the globe, in India, in the United States, in Australia, in Middle East, it's happening, and I truly believe that this data is really going to get onto the cloud.
Fantastic.
And I really need to say that something which a lot of developers here need to know. So we were at a competitor space a month ago, and all our deployment, our virtual machines, our staging, our tests, our deployments, everything was there. We moved to Azure in about less than a month, in about a little more than 3 weeks' time, so about 24, 25 days. We actually moved to Azure machine learning on 2 models within 3 days' time. Yeah. And I think it's phenomenal work that's actually happening over here.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Good. And one of the things I just quickly bring up, we were talking about this last night, when we talk about return on accessible data, it's not just the data that you have, it's what other data can you imagine. So the model for asthma is weather dependent. Okay, so if you understood what a weather forecast was, you could actually do a forecasting of asthma incidents. And going backwards to generate the predictive model, understanding climatological data, which we may make available sort of as a public data set in Azure, would be the way to go. So as Vamsi mentioned, we've built out a machine learning service end-to-end in Azure. And I mentioned this point earlier around sort of these large-scale consumer services and how we're leveraging them for commercial use now. So the design surface for Azure Machine Learning actually came from a service that we used in Bing for running tens of thousands of machine learning experiments concurrently. And we basically took it and retailored it, rehosted it for this environment. One of the things when we looked at what was playing out in machine learning, we looked at all of the friction points, where all of the challenges were. And 2 things we identified is scaling the scarce knowledge and resources of data scientists, getting them to be very, very productive. And the second thing was operationalization. So when we looked in the financial services space, we would see someone who sat in front of SAS would build a financial model, they'd write a memo, hand it to a team who'd code it up in C++ so they could deploy it in production, and several months later they'd have a model that would be running. One of the things that we've done by combining all of these things is, and it's one of the reasons we announced acquisition to acquire Revolution Analytics, sort of the largest enterprise R players, if you're familiar with the R language, so that we could take models that people could build in the tools that data scientists were familiar with, and then with several mouse clicks deploy them as a managed scoring web service. So at the end of training your model, you can click, 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 and then have a managed web service deployed around the globe that can respond and scale itself out in response to load and whatnot. So, stitching this together end to end as a managed service is sort of the first in the industry on that front. And Vamsi's team had to go off and do all of this themselves, and we're hoping that we have things that will make it easier for them so they don't have to do as much of the heavy lifting going forward. So real-time IoT, another critical thing. And people can look at IoT and say, look, we've been doing it in one form or another for a long, long time. If you think about that arc around ambient data, turning it into knowledge and information, and then the insight and action piece, that's really where the novel value is in terms of how we do this. Again, from a large-scale consumer service, ingesting vast amounts of telemetry at low latency is critical for these new services. If you think about Skype, we have close to 400 million monthly active users, hundreds of millions of devices around the planet, and we ingest call quality data from around the planet and then analyze it to create a better business there. So that was sort of the design point that we used in the design target for designing event hubs for Azure. And so the whole IoT and machine-to-machine world, very, very important. And real quickly, Anand's going to come up from Cardiac Design Labs and show them a solution that he's built. So, Anand, welcome. All right, super. Tell us what you've got, real quickly.
Okay. So a quick introduction to what we do and why. Okay. So we are a company that's made up of doctors and engineers together. So we've been looking at the healthcare space in India, and we've been trying to see what are the disease patterns and how does delivery of these care and diagnosis happen. Then we saw a big gap. The big gap was in India, cardiac care is actually only acute. A patient crashes, and then that's when the system swings in.
Very expensive at that point.
So we're trying to see, can we do something before that?
Yep.
But when you talk about something before that, the Indian landscape, which is a growing economy, does not have the infrastructure to do it. So you cannot typically take a tier 1 setup into downstream. It's just not possible where the patients are actually walking in.
Right.
So what we thought is a typical IoT would be to bring all of the cardiac data, which is the ECG, and bring it up central and get a doctor to see it. Doesn't work because we have only 4,000 cardiologists to 64 million cardiac patients. And again, the kind of devices that exist today, for all those who know, are more arrhythmia monitoring devices. Doesn't really work again in Indian scenario because in the 64 million cardiac patients, you have 61 million, which is coronary artery disease. Nothing to do with arrhythmias. Which means we need diagnostic quality, high-end machines at the front line, and an IoT backend that will actually facilitate when an actual case is
You've got a smart device, and then you, as we were talking about earlier, scaling the data scientists, you're scaling the cardiologists.
Correct.
Increasing their productivity.
So they're able to see an absolute actual patient, and they're able to deliver whatever is required in that short 5 minutes or 6 minutes span of time. So a lot of intelligence had to go onto the device. So we built algorithms that actually look at real-time analysis of a patient for a complete spectrum of the ECG. We have imitated a cardiologist onto a machine.
Okay, so show us what you've got real quickly, because we've got...
Yeah, take it off. So I've got one of the Microsoft employees to be a patient today. So he's actually wearing a device that someone would wear at a small hospital when he walks in. So he's got a body-worn device, which he's wearing, and he's got his electrodes pushed up. And we have a bedside monitor that is actually monitoring his ECG continuously.
And his pulse is a little quicker because you're on stage in front of a whole bunch of people. So.
He's running about 110. Yesterday at preparation time, he was about 90. So,
but you have the analysis capabilities in the device.
In the device.
And then you project up, and so you change the workflow for the cardiologist.
So what it actually does is, so while it's running, let's say it detects an anomaly. It snapshots the section of the anomaly, pushes it onto the cloud, and puts a marker on it. Okay? So these marked codes, uploads all categorize themselves into the cloud, which is in this case the Azure. And then we have clients which the cardiologist can open and get analytics of what is being loaded. So they have a dashboard which actually shows the diagnosis going on and the alerts that are coming in, and they're able to pick out and see details of that. So this slide actually shows you the full setup. On the left is where the device and patient is. In this case, it's Ujjwal. And in the center, we have the management dashboard, which actually runs on a small hospital or a slightly large hospital. On the other end is where the cardiologists use any device we're talking about. We're trying to span off mobile devices from tablets to actual mobiles and a web terminal. So
this is what the cardiologist would see here.
Yeah, this is what the cardiologist would see.
Okay, fantastic.
So, yeah, go on, Ujjwal. So he gets to see some analytics like that there. So those markers below there, the blue ones show there's a good ECG. The yellow ones show an actual episode. The red ones will show absolutely critical ones which need immediate attention. What you're actually seeing there, what you're actually seeing there is Ujjwal's ECG coming live off the Azure cloud.
Very cool.
This is going...
So his pulse has come down 10 points because he's kind of relaxed.
The fact that the demo is up, we've got a heart rate down by 10. So what we're going down is actually an actual control panel as though the cardiologist is next to the patient. He's not getting an image snapshot of an EKG, but rather he's getting all the parameters. His PR interval is up there. His QTC is up there. He gets to see online decision. He can actually report remotely. So this is one of the features that would aid a frontline hospital with emergency as well.
Fantastic. We have to cut it there because we've got to wrap up. But thank you very much. A great solution. The thing I love about that is where I started off around sort of the deep technical knowledge, and then what are the worthy challenges, and then the pragmatism to go solve it. I think it all comes together in that solution. The final thing I want to mention here is that we've relaunched Power BI. So if you haven't seen this, the ability to incorporate data from a whole bunch. We've seen great examples of action, changing workflows, but also putting the insights directly into the hands of people who can make their own decisions. There's a tremendous opportunity to put analytics in front of the dashboard. So Power BI is a great dashboarding solution. One of the things that we've just added to Power BI is the real-time capabilities. So it's not like we're looking at a snapshot report or roll-up from yesterday, but in a number of businesses right now, in frankly our own Azure business, we need to see what's happening second by second, minute by minute to understand how things are playing out. So I just want to briefly highlight that and then close real quickly. So I think tremendous opportunities in terms of the data space, tremendous opportunity. If I go back to the key points I want to take away, the reason I am here is to try to enlist you and enlist your imagination. We've done a lot of heavy lifting on the technology front, but it only comes alive as a platform company when people like yourselves build incredible things that matter in people's lives. And so let us know. My email alias is David C. I can help connect you with teams inside, and as we've talked about from the HiFix guys, much more responsive in terms of our ability to respond and change the solutions for you. But you're critical to our success as a platform company. We only succeed if we make you successful. You'll have a ton of great technical content, but bring your imagination to it. Think of it for its disruptive potential and not just as infrastructure that might be faster and cheaper to deploy. So with that, I'll wrap, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Campbell, for those interesting insights. A bigger round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen.